Election of 1948. Obviously, President Harry Truman was running, and he had a very interesting endorsement. Now, keep in mind, Harry Truman was a Democrat, and he was fairly progressive, advocated for universal health care, civil rights, and he had the right idea on a lot of these issues. And also, in the previous midterm elections of 1946, the Republicans had regained control of Congress. So the issues in the day were that the Republicans had passed the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, and that is basically the very first, or one of the very first right-to-work laws. And so it restricts the power of labor unions, and it really sides with big businesses and tries to destroy workers' rights. And so that's going to be the topic of the recording that I'm going to play for you. And interestingly enough, Harry Truman was endorsed by Ronald Reagan, who at this point was a Democrat. And he said a lot of special things here.
And later, more of Serenade to a Presidential Candidate by Jack Lawrence and Arnold Stang. But now to Ronald Reagan in Hollywood. This is Ronald Reagan speaking to you from Hollywood. You know me as a motion picture actor. But tonight I'm just a citizen, pretty concerned about the national election next month, and more than a little...
I have a few things to say about this first part. Ronald Reagan always came off as this very scripted, very fake, incredibly, he liked to groom himself before talking, and you can really tell that he's not being genuine or himself. And the second thing is, this is pretty typical of Hollywood celebrities trying to get involved in politics and thinking that they know everything and that they're just trying to encourage people to vote. Although this recording in particular is a little different because he does talk about policies. So let's continue listening.
With those promises the Republicans made before they got control of Congress a couple of years ago. I remember listening to the radio on election night in 1946. Joseph Martin, the Republican Speaker of the House, said very solemnly, and I quote, "We Republicans intend to work for a real increase in income for everybody by encouraging more production."
So that's a flat out lie. Republicans never want to work for a real increase in income for everybody. They just want to work for a real increase in money for the rich. But let's backtrack a little bit because he did say something else.
We Republicans intend to work for a real increase in income for everybody by encouraging more production and lower prices.
More production and lower prices. That basically means more production means they just want to force workers to continue to work, basically right to work. No collective bargaining, no strikes, no nothing. Just work, work, work until you fall over. And in terms of low prices, it just really means they want to lower taxes on the wealthy.
Without impairing wages or working conditions.
Yeah, that's just a lie.
Unquote. Remember that promise, a real increase in income for everybody. But what actually happened? The profits of corporations have doubled. Well,
yes, so when the Republicans say, oh, low taxes, more production, they just mean they want to double the profits of double, triple, quadruple, quintuple the profits of corporations and do things for their very wealthy friends. That's really all they mean. Keep that in mind. This is who they've always been. This was back in 1948, 73 years ago, and that was what the Republicans were like back then, and that's what they are now. And this is what they will continue to be. So make sure you're really thinking about the policies and you know what they're really talking about, because they use a lot of code words and they are very deceptive. And it's easy to trick simple people who are not engaging in critical thinking.
Workers' wages have increased by only 1/4. In other words, profits have gone up 4 times as much as wages. And the small increase workers did receive was more than eaten up by rising prices, which have also poured into their savings. For example, here's an Associated Press dispatch I read the other day about Smith L. Carpenter, a craftsman in Union Springs, New York. Seems that Mr. Carpenter retired some years ago thinking he had enough money saved up so that he could live out his last years without having to worry. But he didn't figure on this Republican inflation, which ate up all his savings, and so he's gone back to work. The reason this is news is Mr. Carpenter is 91 years old. Now,
That is brutal.
to the contrast, the Standard Oil Company of New Jersey, which reported a net profit of $210 million after taxes for the first half of 1948, an increase of 70% in 1 year. In other words, high prices have not been caused by higher wages, but by bigger and
Yeah, high prices have not been caused by higher wages. So all those idiots out there who are saying raising the minimum wage is going to destroy businesses. Oh, and it's going to be so terrible and prices will go up. So we can't raise wages. People need to make starvation wages. That's all a bunch of nonsense. High prices are not caused by higher wages. Now, funny because obviously later when Ronald Reagan became a Republican and then became president, he obviously wanted lower wages and he did not support real good policies. So he used to be very different is the point, but continue listening.
bigger profit. The Republican promises sounded pretty good in 1946. But what has happened since then, since the 80th Congress took over? Prices have climbed to the highest level in history, although the death of the OPA was supposed to bring prices down through, quote, the natural process of free competition.
That sounds a lot like Reaganomics, voodoo economics, supply side economics. So maybe Ronald Reagan should have listened to his younger self and not done the horrible economic policies later, but I digress. Let's continue.
Quote. Labor has been handcuffed for the vicious Taft-Hartley law. Social Security benefits have been snatched away from almost 1 million workers.
And then many years later, Ronald Reagan, who became a Republican and then became president, gutted the social safety net and destroyed unions. It's just really sad how people sell out and change their views, like Ronald Reagan.
By the Gearhart bill. Fair employment practices, which had worked so well during wartime, have been abandoned. Veterans' pleas for low-cost homes have been ignored, and many people are still living in made-over chicken coops and garages. Tax reduction bills have been passed to benefit the higher income brackets alone.
Yeah, tax reduction bills have been passed to benefit the wealthy. And later, when Ronald Reagan was president, he cut taxes on the wealthy and tanked the country. So, gee, Ronnie, maybe you should have listened to your younger self.
The average worker saved only $1.73 a week. In the false name of economy, millions of children have been deprived of milk once provided through the federal school lunch program. This was the payoff of the Republicans' promise. And this is why we must have new faces in the Congress of the United States, Democratic faces. This is why we must elect.
So basically, Ronald Reagan, as I said, is campaigning for the Democrat President Harry Truman, and he's also campaigning to get the Republicans out of Congress. He wants Democrats back in the majority. And as you can see here, this young Ronald Reagan is a pro-union, pro-minimum, pro-living wage, and he's against giving tax cuts to the wealthy. It's just sad how people change over time. Let's continue, though.
Once provided through the federal school lunch program. This was the payoff of the Republicans' promise. And this is why we must have new faces in the Congress of the United States, Democratic faces. This is why we must elect not only President Truman, but also men like Mayor Hubert Humphrey of Minneapolis, the Democratic candidate for senator from Minnesota.
And keep in mind, Hubert Humphrey later went on to become the vice president under President Lyndon Johnson. Of course, by that point, Ronald Reagan had already switched to Republican.
Mayor Humphrey of 37 is one of the ablest men in public life. He's running against Joe Ball, who was a member of the Senate Labor Committee, helped write the Taft-Hartley law.
See, Ronald Reagan here keeps railing against the Taft-Hartley Act, which was a right-to-work law, which tried to destroy labor unions. So it's pretty ironic how later he turned out to be the president who destroyed labor unions. I keep bringing that up, but it's really important because it's crucial that we understand how these policies worked and how they happened and the history behind them so that we can avoid making the same policy errors over and over. history is repetitive because people try to do the same horrible policies that were done in the past, and those things don't really go away.
The Republicans don't want to lose Ball, and they're spending a small fortune on his campaign. They've even sent Dewey and Warren out to Minneapolis to speak for him. President Truman knows the value of a man like Hubert Humphrey in the Senate, and he has been in Minneapolis too, campaigning against Joe Ball. Mayor Humphrey and Ball are the symbols of the political battle going on in America today. While Ball is the banner carrier for Wall Street, Mayor...
Yeah, so he's two things here. So basically Reagan is defining the Republican Party as the party of Wall Street, the party of big corporations who want to destroy workers' rights. And he is trying to label the Democratic Party as the party of the working class people. So that's the strategy that's being used here. And the second thing about President Truman is that while he was running for his election, he also made a very active effort to campaign against the Republicans in Congress, because obviously if you don't have Congress, then you don't really have anything, you don't have any power. So he really made the right to work laws the center of his campaign, and he campaigned against them and said, well, when the Republicans are in power, they're going to destroy workers' rights, and it's going to be harder for you, and they're going to raise taxes on you while lowering taxes for the wealthy, and that's why you should vote for me, because I will repeal these policies. And so you have to run on the issues.
Humphrey is fighting for all the principles advocated by President Truman, for adequate low-cost housing, for civil rights, for prices people can afford.
Yeah, civil rights. It's ironic how Ronald Reagan says that, because he's super racist, and later he supported apartheid and then designated Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. And so it just goes to show you that Ronald Reagan was always this slivering snake, and he was never genuine.
To pay, and for a labor movement.
Or maybe he just changed, I don't know.
Freed of the Taft-Hartley law. I take great pride in presenting my friend from Minneapolis, Mayor Hubert H. Humphrey, candidate for United States Senate.
So the big takeaway here is that it really matters what policies you support now, because perhaps you supported the right policies many years ago, but now you support totally wrong policies. So maybe in the past you were anti-war and you were pro-union, but now you're pro-war and you're anti-union. So it doesn't matter that you were on the right side of the issues before. You have to be on the right side of them now, or it doesn't matter. So, or maybe you were wrong on the issues before. So maybe you were pro-war before, but you're now anti-war. So if you've changed and you've gotten better on the policies, well, then good for you. But really, just because someone was one way in the past doesn't mean they're that way now. So keep that in mind. What policies do these people support now? And secondly, in terms of Ronald Reagan, keep in mind that he was a Democrat until he was 51. He idolized FDR. He supported New Deal policies. And of course, we just heard the video where he campaigned for Harry Truman. And so that's who Ronald Reagan used to be. And then over time, while before he had been pro-union and against giving tax cuts to the wealthy, he changed his views and he decided to be in favor of destroying unions and cutting taxes on the wealthy. So while the 1948 Ronald Reagan loved labor unions and he was against cutting taxes on the wealthy and deregulating the economy, the 1981 Ronald Reagan destroyed labor unions, cut taxes on the wealthy, deregulated the economy so much with his nonsense supply side trickle down voodoo nonsense economics. So it just goes to show you that people are capable of getting worse and doing horrible things with their policies. So watch out. And whenever you hear politicians talking about, or whenever you hear politicians making platitudes, we'll obviously just ignore them because they're being silly. But if you hear them talking about policies, listen to them critically and make sure they're being honest, because a lot of politicians might say that they're anti-war when really they are very pro-war and they want to continue occupations and, sales of weapons and all of those things. And maybe they say they're for low taxes, but they leave out the part that they're actually in favor of low taxes for the wealthy, and they want higher taxes for people like you, working people. And when they say they want to reform Social Security and make it better, they really just mean they want to get rid of it so that you can't get anything. That's what they want to do. They just want to cut all the programs. They just want to destroy anything that can materially help you because it doesn't serve the interests of their corporate donors. So, big takeaway here is think critically about policies, know what the good policies are, use your brain to make the right decisions.